All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming. I see a few people are still coming in, so I'm extending the intro a little bit there. Also, I have just noticed that the title here on my slide deck doesn't match exactly the title as it's given in the agenda. So if you are here for a thing called Gitpod, Codespaces, Devpod, and so on, this is the right talk, okay? So it's about cloud and container-based development environments. All right, so maybe a few words about myself. So this is me. My name is Matthias. As already announced, I work for a company called Novatech. As I just arrived, are there any colleagues from me in the room? Okay, thanks for coming. Muchas gracias. And yeah, besides my role at Novatech, where I normally try to help clients on their journey to like cloud-native software development and cloud adoption. I also teach at 2 universities in the area of Stuttgart in the field of distributed systems and modern software architecture. So this is kind of all comes together here in this talk because, yeah, one of the things I normally do when I teach is a lot of hands-on things. So I don't want to do much of theory stuff. I really want my students to work on the things. And that, of course, requires that they all have a good setup and they have the ability to do the actual development without the hassle of a lot of setup. Yeah, this brings me right to the idea why I started building this talk. I'm going to start with this. This is like a diagram of a typical kind of landscape that we see nowadays very often, both in the lectures, what I teach, and also very often in our customer environments. So the nature of things have turned into a more polyglot environment. We have different services running on different frameworks, connecting to each other with different kind of protocols, very often container-based, sometimes also running on orchestrations like Kubernetes. And all those different tools and technologies that play into that, of course, require a certain setup of a development environment to be able to work on all that. And so this is also my kind of to-do that I normally have for my students, is to say, okay, build something which is not built on one stack, something with different kind of frameworks that communicate and like figure out what is the difficulty there and what you need to be successful with this. So the way I normally start, I give a sample. So I say I have a mini kind of microservice application, so it's at least a bit distributed. I have a main component that exposes a REST API, and I have a front-end technology that connects to that. And also there is some persistence and database connectivity. And I say, like, the important thing is not actually the language and the framework you build the tools with, but the way those things communicate. So I define the REST API and say this is kind of the important contract between the components, and then you should build different kind of front ends and REST API implementations for that, so that in an ideal way we can dynamically exchange them. We can figure out what tool makes it easier for which purpose and get a feeling for what that means in that polyglot development. Then I also, as we pretty much do container now all the time, I ask them to bring the things into container images, potentially provide a Docker Compose file, and then put everything into a Git repo. So that makes it easier for me to analyze things, keeps the development a bit more consistent, and so on. In the worst case, I just get emails with a lot of stack traces, and I just say, well, I can't debug that. This certainly doesn't work. All right, so of course, with all that, we have distributed things, so we have distributed problems. So of course, it can be that there's a lack of programming skill, technology skill, like, for example, containers, Kubernetes. Sometimes things go down on the operating system level. Remote debugging, as I said, can be an issue. And then the local development setup. So which one do you think takes the most of the time? Any idea, opinion? Do you guys see any hands? The last one, yeah. I mean, yes, it's the last one. That's correct. And it was, I think it was easy because that's also the title of the talk. But this is really super annoying for me because this takes time from the things away that I actually want to teach. So if I want to teach them polyglot software development and I get stuck most of the time just by fixing local JDK and JRE setups, we never really get to that point where I want to go. And that's why I turned the focus in the last 2 semesters to those cloud development environments. So here's kind of the dependencies that we have. And it's not only at university, of course. So we have clients or students, they need an IDE to build their stuff. They need to connect to GitHub, they need to connect to Docker Hub, and they need all the things in their IDE to be productive. And now with those things that came up, let's say recently, let's say over the last 2-3 years, with Codespaces, with Gitpod, it helps in a lot of things. Because first of all, you don't need to build on your machine. So the development environment is running somewhere else. You can totally predefine it and put all the things in there that you need. That also makes it kind of able to provide everyone the same kind of setup. So very often we have environments where the power of the machine is not good enough, or they don't have administrative rights to turn something in a network configuration, which makes it tricky for VMs and stuff. So with this independent environment, on the one hand, you have the possibilities for polyglot development. You can also expose very easy the functionality of your services. So it's more difficult to expose services that run on your local machine. And you also, and this is pretty cool, you have that container support. So you can build those containers within a remote container and have everything in a like, let's say, well-organized space. Now, this is just to say those things don't really come for free, but they have some certain free trials, especially talking about Gitpod and Codespaces. I think with a normal kind of setup, you get about 40 hours something-ish every month. This is certainly not enough for a 24, I guess that's a 24/7, but like a 40-week kind of developer job. But if you just feel like try out things and play with some things for a bit, it's certainly good enough. I have never reached the end of the trial period so far, so that certainly works. Now, these are the things I want to look into today and introduce. I'm sure there are more, but these are the ones that I certainly have some experience with. So who in here has already worked with Codespaces? One hand. Who has worked with Gitpod? No hands? Or maybe the light is pretty strong. But I don't see everybody raising their hands. So I hope this is a bit new for everyone. And I think Devpod is probably the one which is least known. It's also a bit different in the nature, but I will come to that in the end. Now, I start with this one first, and I probably do this live. So what you basically need to do all this is having a GitHub account. And then you can say, okay, so for today, I want to create a new repository. I'm calling this Devoxx Greece. This is still available, which is great. I'm going to add a README and create the repo. So now I'm here with an empty repo, and how your GitHub interface normally looks like, you will have that code button, but you won't have that button. I'm going to come to that later. So normally you use that for download, like cloning, getting the URL for cloning to your local machine, but there is this Codespaces tab that you might have never noticed yet. And I'm going to say I want to create a Codespace on main. That means it's taking the main branch of that Git repo, and it's deploying a container somewhere where we don't know, and it's exposing the IDE here in the browser. So literally, I don't need any setup on my machine at all, except an internet connection and a browser. And now it's going to tell me, okay, I hope you can read this. Welcome to Codespaces, you're on the default image. So this provides features for various things. It says Python, Node.js, Docker, and more. So let's say we're a bit JVM focused here. Do we have Java? Yes, we have Java. There's an OpenJDK 21 installed. So I can say, do I have a Docker? I also have a Docker. That's great. And now I want to build something real quick. I don't have much time, so I say curl start.spring.io. This is not what I expected. OK, so this is all live. I don't have a pre-built setup. Maybe this does the trick. Yeah, OK, so this is the Spring initializer that helps you building like Spring projects. And I'm just want to build one right here real quick. So I don't want to configure this now. And I want to allow it to. So I say I want a project with web. I should probably type well, actuator. And I want a Java version, let's say 21. I want the type to be Maven project. And that's it. That should be good enough. So I'm going to download it that way. So I just got that file now here, which says demo.zip. I'm going to unzip it. I'm getting all the output here. So this basically pops in then into my Git repo here. And I can say Maven Spring boot. Sorry, I can't type. Run. OK, so that will basically leverage that JDK in this container. As this is a brand new container, it's not going to start downloading all the internet. There is no Maven cache or anything alike, as it is, as I said, not on my machine. But eventually, it will come up as running. So it says, OK, my application is now live. It also will highlight that I have this port right here. And then I can say, OK, please start it. Well, there is no code inside because I haven't written anything. But that's the reason why I added the actuator. So if I put the actuator in here, there will be a response. So, OK, this application is up and running and well. So if I say, for example, health here, then it says it's up. So, and I could take this link and share it with everyone else. So I'm not developing locally, and I can share my code and my API also with other people as well. Now, besides that, I can also let's jump back here so to the repo. In the meantime, it should actually show that I have a code space opened. It's the cautious goldfish, beautiful name, and I can also say, OK, I might not want to run this in a browser. So I have various options here. So I can say I also want to do this in Visual Studio Code. That will fire up my local Visual Studio Code instance. And as you can see here now on the bottom left, it will say opening remote. So it's going to open that it's going to attach to that very same container that I had just built with the other step. So you can see all the code is already in here. And I don't know if you believe it, but if I say I'm going to open a new terminal and say, OK, I'm going to start a new at a file touch from VS Code. Now the file is here. And I go back to my browser, then this file is also here. So basically, both IDEs point to that same container instance running somewhere else. And I could do the same thing here. Open up a new terminal and say touch from web. So the new file is now here. And I also see it here. So how does this all work? If I ever find my slide again, here. So technically, this is, as I said, somewhere cloud-based. It is from GitHub, which is kind of with Microsoft. It's probably running on some Azure cloud environment. This is all a thing that we really don't care about. So we use a higher level abstraction. We directly connect to that container, which contains the clone of the Git repo, all the languages on runtimes that I want inside, and all the tooling and the extensions. And on the client side, I can decide for myself, do I want to use Visual Studio Code in browser. There is also an integration with JetBrains IDEs. So I'm trying to show that one real quick as well, as we probably have a lot of Java people in here. So what you need is that gateway. And that gateway is still in beta. Beta means it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. Especially on live demos, it sometimes doesn't. But I'm going to try my luck today. So here we see our cautious goldfish again. And then I can say I want to connect to this one with my IntelliJ IDE. So this one might take a bit longer from experience as just firing up that browser-based VS Code. So I will let it run in the background. Most likely it's gonna steal my focus anyway. So it has to download some new binaries. I don't exactly know what it all does, but we'll see in a second. I have 25 minutes still, so that's we'll get it done by then. Yeah, I'll switch back to it. I'm just getting lost with all the open screens here. So yeah, potentially you could also just like SSH or a command line into it. But I think you get the point of how this architecture works. Of course, if you do this all the first time, you got to give permissions to all that. But this is pretty straightforward. So from a support perspective, with Codespaces, you can say these are the various IDEs that you can use, and everything, like at least this JetBrains client, of course, doesn't only support IntelliJ IDEs, but all the other JetBrains products. From a Git perspective, you can, of course, only use GitHub, as it is a GitHub project, and the underlying cloud, in this case, it's most likely Azure. Now, this brings me to that second point, which is Gitpod, which is technically doing a similar thing, but has a slightly different pitch. So, I mean, GitHub, of course, has a more side business than just Codespaces, as you can imagine. For Gitpod, this cloud-based IDEs is really the core element of their offering. OK, so here we go. Thanks for stealing my focus again. Yeah, I mean, I should probably be fair and say normally it only takes that long on the very first connection. So when it works out all of the requirements. But it seems to take particularly long today, so I'm going to go back to my slides. Yeah, and here you can see on the Gitpod web pages where I took that from, they really praise this cloud development environment thing as the thing for the future. For me, like this future. OK, so somebody's trying to call me here. OK, there's a mismatch. We'll see. Yeah, as you can see, this is not recorded. We'll give it a bit of, see, this is what beta means. Now, technically speaking, this Gitpod thing looks about just the same. So I can also show that. What I'm just going to do in the meantime real quick, I'm going back to this code space and say, OK, I have all this code in there now. I probably don't need that zip file, so I can delete it. For the rest, I can just say first code drop and push that all. Yes, please do. And push that all to the repository. Hello. So this, and now I'm going to sync the changes, and everything is going to get pushed. So if I look into my repo again here now, I should be able, no, it's not there yet. Maybe the network is letting me down a little bit today. Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, one of the requirements. As I said before, you need internet and you need a browser. If this connection doesn't work, it might become tricky. So which connection am I actually on? That's good. So now I should see all the things in here. OK, everything is in my Git repo. For Gitpod, you basically open up the URL here, which doesn't look like that if you're not signed in. If you're not signed in, it looks like that for the first time. And then you have to say, I want to log in with one of the Git providers. So you can already see this is more independent when it comes to where is my repo residing. As mine is now in GitHub, I'm going to connect to this one. And we can also already see I have a couple of workspaces that I used before. This is also a nice kind of thing. So you can basically separate individual development environments and leave a certain timestamp on code in a separate environment. Sometimes, and you say, okay, this wasn't worth it, you just throw it away. But yeah, it's like all Git-based. So if you don't push it to a certain branch, you might lose it after a while. But in a certain way, if you want to work on different projects, you can separate them and make your life easier with that. So I'm going to say I want a new workspace. No, I don't want this one. So I want the one that I just created, Devoxx Greece. So here it is. And now it's going to ask me which browser, like which IDE do I want. Again, I have the similar options here. I use the browser one, and here I can define how powerful is actually my machine supposed to be. Of course, the more powerful machine I take, the faster my credits go away. The base environment normally works pretty well for all kinds of standard development. And then it's going to come up with an own workspace here as well. So in a similar way, this one probably started to, it detected already it's a Java project because there's some Java code inside. With this one, it also starts with the default image. Let me increase that a little. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to open a new terminal to make this better readable. So I'm going to say Java minus version. So this is still running on version 11. So if there's anyone from Gitpod listening, you should probably update your default image. Anyway, you can still do that by yourself, and you can customize that as well. So, okay, so. All right. Yeah, as I said, normally those come out of the box with a certain default image. The software components in there might not always be from the same version, but you have the ability to customize that default image to make sure everyone that starts with that has exactly the same built-in setup. So now I have that Java 21, and I should hopefully be able to say Maven Spring Boot run here as well. This time it hopefully works. Okay, and so as I said, from a technology standpoint, both of them can pretty much do the same thing. So here it also says open it in browser, and it's the same application which is now running here. All right. And in the meantime, we also have that one, our good old friend IntelliJ. And of course, this is now pointing to the same repo. So I have now all the possibilities that I have with the normal IntelliJ environment here too. Something you probably have not seen in your IntelliJ IDE environment yet. This is basically showing also the metrics of the underlying container you are working in. And this one kind of needs a bit more power than if you work on the things that with VisualStudio Code, at least from my experience. But yeah, play with it if you're interested. I don't want to do the IDE comparison here. I'm more like trying to show how easy you can access that. All right. So, and then, of course, once you start developing, you can, of course, put in all the plugins for your favorite languages, that you have linting, auto-completion, all the various things. This is the support that you get from Gitpod. So you have a variety of providers, you have a variety of IDEs, and you can also decide on which cloud will the environment be deployed. This is not an option I have ever selected, but potentially you can do that. All right, so these were the two cloud-based ones. Now, Devpod works a bit in a different way. It's not a direct comparison to that, even though if you go on their website, it kind of pitches towards that. It says it's like Codespaces, but it's open source, it's client-only, it's unopinionated. So this is an open source tooling that basically puts you more in the position to act as a provider like Gitpod and Codespaces. So what you essentially do, and you have like a big support matrix here, so you can say you can use all of those IDEs. You can pretty much use any Git provider. You can also even use like your local file system if there's like a Git initialized folder. And you have a lot more of these cloud and infrastructure options. And you need those because you actually decide which is my infrastructure option where I deploy that development container to. So what you need to do, you install a client app. In this case, you need to install a client app. And then you say, OK, what kind of provider do I want? Do I want a local Docker daemon? Do I want a cloud VM? Do I want a Kubernetes cluster? You have all the various options. And then you connect your repos to it and run it. So I'm going to show this to you real quick. I have that here. So this is what it looks like, pretty unspectacular. So you have providers here. As I said, I have configured now Azure Cloud, my local Docker daemon, and a Kubernetes cluster. So in this Kubernetes configuration, you need to specify what is your kubeconfig and the context. So just to let you know, I have this kind of Kubernetes cluster running right here. This is, in this case, also running remotely on Azure, but it doesn't really matter as long as my Kubernetes context points to it. And then in the workspace, I can say, I want to create a new one. So where is my Git repo? And here I can put in a remote one, or I can put in something local from the file system. But as I have just created one, I say github.com. Hope this works. And then I'll pick this one as the provider. And I'm going to say create workspace. And now it's going to do this thing. So in parallel, what I'm going to try to show, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. This is like K9s is a Kubernetes observability tool. And pretty soon, we should actually see a new namespace getting created. Oh, it's already here. It just has, it's called Devpod. And now this is like the container which is getting created in that cluster. So as opposed to run this development environment in the cloud, you can kind of control where this is going to run. This, of course, also makes it easier for you to say, I want multiple development environments of the same type and provide it like to different groups of people. Like, for example, if you teach a class on a certain technology and you want all the students to have the same fundamental setup, and you don't want to tell them, well, you need to use like GitHub or Gitpod or like have any subscription, because in that case, you are kind of the provider of that. So this will now create that container. It's going to take a few seconds. It's already there. So looking back here, this one hasn't seen it's finished yet, and now it has. So I also selected to use VisualStudio Code as the front end. So now it's basically using my local VisualStudio Code. Now I have to say, I trust this. And this points now to this newly built container, which has been initialized with the repo that I have just created. And yeah, so you can do this with on-prem and remote resources. This gives it a slight advantage over the technologies I've shown before, because they would only work with Git repos that already are there in a GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket environment. This one really can be something that you host privately and you don't want to have somewhere exposed on the internet, and you have the flexibility to decide who you want to expose it to. I mean, this is one also is, of course, a lot newer. It's definitely not as mature as the two others, but it also has, like, as I said, a bit of a different pitch. All right. So that's that. Let me go back to my presentation. Yeah. So we have seen the three different options. Now let's talk a bit about customization. So in Gitpod, you have this thing called a Gitpod YAML file. And with this file, you can predefine which image do you want your container environment to run on. In the demo that I just did, I did not do that. Because I just used that default image from their side to see what they kind of come up with. But you can pre-build your container image. You can basically put all the libraries, all the things in that you want to have. But this YAML file also gives you the possibility to say, I want to run tasks and expose some ports and do some things on the image right after it started, before the actual developer accesses it. What I have done, I have basically taken that default image and configured some things in there. For example, that I have Java, like the latest Java out of the box, kubectl, a couple of other things to configure the shell, which makes it then easier to use. I can probably try and show you that real quick. So I have too many windows. This is a problem. You get too many windows open if you demo too many tools, but that kind of comes with the nature of thing. So I could say, I want a new file and say, I'm going to call this Gitpod YAML. Oh, it already exists. Okay. Then I'm going to use that file. So as you can see, it already added this one to do a Maven install per default. Let's say maybe I don't want that. I just want an image that I provide myself. I just need to look up that image's name. I just use that in another. So I'm going to use that one. So I'm just coming back from Devoxx France, where we did a lab on OpenTelemetry, and we used it right there to basically expose this to a set of participants, and it worked pretty well. So I'm going to push that and say Gitpod YAML. This is now synced. And now I also have to say I need to restart that one. So this is going to shut it down. No, I did. I'm not sure if it pulls the new image straight away or if I have to really rebuild the container, but we'll see in a second. So it didn't run anything here. Okay. Now this is still the old image. All right, let's go back to the presentation here, because I'm running out of time. But I hope I can show you that in the end still. Now, Codespaces and Devpod use a different approach. This is a more standardized thing called development containers, which has initially, I think, been kicked off by Microsoft. And they still contribute a lot in that space, but it's also an open technology that everybody can contribute to. And it's a bit similar to kind of a Docker file. So you have this devcontainer.json, where you can describe how your container is supposed to look like. So again, similar to that Gitpod YAML that we have just seen, you can basically say, I want a kind of a base image, and then I want to add some certain customizations. So when I use VisualStudio Code, I wanted to have the Java and the Docker extension, and that will automatically then be present for you once you come up with that started IDE. And you can put a lot of things in there. So you can also extend the features, like say, okay, I want Docker in Docker, I want kubectl, Helm, and Minikube, which would already give you like a mini Kubernetes development environment already also in your browser. But the downside of that is that this dev container will be built and started every time you spin up a new IDE. And this is great in development. This can be difficult, let's say, in kind of production, because we really had an issue with exactly that 3 days ago in Devoxx France, as this feature here, Docker in Docker, just suddenly decided to not work anymore. And this can make quite a bit of stress for you when all your students suddenly start up the environments and suddenly the feature is not there anymore. So it got resolved and we were able to get things done. But if you really depend on an image on a certain point in time, I would certainly recommend to you to build a static image and use the power of immutability at that point. Otherwise, it can get you into a bit of trouble there. All right. Now, I mean, I don't really want to go much into that, how this pricing thing works. This also might be a bit outdated because I think the last time I updated was in January. I think in Gitpod you get a certain amount of credits, and then the power of the machine will take the credits away over the runtime. Codespaces basically looks at your hours of usage and your storage. And if you basically exceed that, the thing's going to stop, or you have to like put a credit card in to like pay more as a typical cloud service. All right, so yeah, for the Java people in here, I mean, you have seen most of the things already. I mean, you get support. SDK-man is normally installed in most of the base images. You can configure all the extensions for Visual Studio Code. With most of the tools, they're getting picked up automatically, or at least recommended to you and say, do you want to install that? You get IntelliJ support and pretty much everything you need for. Then on the IntelliJ side, this is what we've seen before. This kind of gateway here is still in beta, but after a bit of time, it actually worked. The downside, of course, is here that this only works with the Ultimate Edition. So with the Community Edition, you cannot use it. So you need the paid variant. In the university, it doesn't really matter because the students get that for free. And in the real world, I think most Java developers have that anyway. But still, I wanted to at least mention that. All right, so yeah, we have seen that. If you look into that gateway, of course, you can connect to that GitHub Codespaces. In the same way, you could also connect to instances that are run in Gitpod. This works pretty identical. And here I put a screenshot in just in case the things would not run, but it actually it came up. So in the end, you get your feeling of your well-known IDE, but still connecting to a dev container environment. All right, yeah, same thing from a shell. I think you've seen this before. I can show it again. Where is my... So let's stop that real quick. This one is still open. So if you start a new shell, you normally have the option here to say, I want the bash, I want fish shell, ZSH. You can, of course, use OMA ZSH, which is, and configure that to your likes. So what I did in my pre-built image that I use very often, I also import some of my history. So I got auto suggestions, and I got pretty much the same command line experience that I have in my, as on my local machine. Okay. So yeah, that's what I show here. What I also normally put in is that command line fuzzy finder to that makes you traverse your files and directories quickly. And as I said, customize the things as you want. Same thing for container support. I mean, containers come out of the Docker is available as a feature in all of them, and then you can add the things that you want to have. Docker Compose works out of the box. If you like building various images, you can use build packs. You can use Chip from Google for your Java development and build your containers. It's just, as I said, you have everything in there that your normal environment provides for you as well. Now, I'm going to finish things up. I mean, I think not everyone in the room here is teaching distributed systems in university. So this is a scenario you might likely not have all the time. But there are quite a few scenarios where things really make sense. I mean, as I said, trainings. We, at Novatech, we provide trainings for a lot of cloud-native technologies like Docker, Kubernetes, Prometheus, Grafana, and so on. And so far, or in the past, we've built and we made sure that the student experience is pretty much hassle-free by setting up predefined VMs, where we put everything in a VM image and then fired them up once the training took place. This is somehow heavy and somehow expensive as well. So with that new approach, it's a lot easier to provide just like a dev container specification, and then everybody can spin it up on the environment where they like, and still have a consistent experience where you don't have to tell them, please install these 25 requirements on your own machine. Also, if you want to roll out a certain kind of template to multiple different users, this is pretty cool, as you can predefine your dev container image. Also, and this is what I probably use it most for, most of us have probably a main project that they work on and have their local environment tailored to that. And if you look into another project, you don't want to mess things up by different configurations. So it's easy to separate configurations, or if you just want to try out some tooling. Like, yeah, just recently I downloaded the OpenTelemetry GitHub project, and I put that into like one dedicated container. I build things from there, and I'm sure it's not going to mess with anything that I have locally. So this makes it really helpful. My time is up, and this is also the last slide. So before I open things for question, I would first of all say thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you so much.